In the far reaches of the galaxy, there was a small research vessel called the Odyssey. It was not a military ship, nor was it heavily armed. It was built for exploration, discovery, and communication. The ship's mission was straightforward, but dangerous in its own ways. It was sent to chart systems that no one had visited before, to record the data of unclaimed planets, and to bring back information that might help colonies survive in these remote areas. For most people, space beyond the familiar trade routes seemed calm and empty, but for the crew of the Odyssey, it was anything but. Every day, the stars reminded them that they were tiny dots in a vast, uncharted universe, where danger could appear from anywhere and at any time. The crew itself was small, numbering just over a dozen people. Each member had a specific role, yet they all shared a camaraderie born from long months together in cramped quarters, traveling through the silent void. Arjun Hale was the communications officer, calm, methodical, and sharp-minded. He had spent years handling complex signals, deciphering encrypted messages, and maintaining the ship's fragile lines of contact with a home colony. Arjun had a reputation for keeping a level head, even when situations looked hopeless. His colleagues often joked that while others panicked at a warning light or an engine fluctuation, Arjun would sip his tea, analyze the problem, and calmly report the data. But this calmness was not arrogance. It was a skill honed over years of surviving in an environment where mistakes could be fatal. The Odyssey was not alone in the sense that it existed without a purpose. It was an extension of the small, peaceful colony. It came from a settlement that had managed to survive on the outer edges of human space. Despite limited resources, life on the colony was simple but harsh. The people relied on trade ships, supply routes, and occasional contact with larger human settlements to keep their community alive. They farmed in enclosed biodomes, mined precious minerals, and maintained a small defensive perimeter, but their real strength lay in diplomacy and their ability to adapt. Their survival depended on understanding the universe, knowing who might help them, and knowing who could destroy them if provoked. They were cautious but hopeful, believing in their ability to endure even if the odds were stacked against them. Humanity itself had earned a fearsome reputation in this part of the galaxy. The so-called Deathworlders were humans who had survived some of the most inhospitable planets imaginable, planets with lethal climates, aggressive wildlife, and environments that would kill ordinary humans in hours. Other species called them reckless, unpredictable, or even suicidal, and yet, in every battle they had faced, humans had proven resilient, resourceful, and terrifyingly efficient. Across colonies, space stations, and interstellar trade routes, stories circulated of humans who had faced overwhelming odds and emerged victorious, often when no one else would dare intervene. Their fleets were powerful, yes, but their real power lay in their adaptability, their loyalty, and their refusal to leave anyone behind. They were guardians, warriors, and survivors rolled into one, and even distant allies knew that calling for human help was never a gamble. It was a promise that someone would come no matter what. The research vessel's mission, while seemingly mundane in comparison to tales of fleet battles and planetary survival, carried the weight of this larger reputation. The Odyssey had been sent to a system at the edge of known human influence. Its path took it through uncharted starfields where maps were sketchy and hazards were unknown. Every asteroid belt, every gravity well, and every radiation cloud could damage the ship, disrupt communications, or injure the crew. Still, the crew pushed forward, driven by the desire to expand human knowledge and, in their own way, protect their home colony by learning what dangers lurked beyond the familiar borders. Life aboard the ship followed a rhythm dictated by necessity. There were shifts for monitoring navigation systems, scanning for life or anomalies, maintaining the engines and checking communications. Meals were simple but nourishing. Sleep was scheduled to ensure someone was always alert, and personal time was limited but cherished. Each crew member had personal routines. Some read ancient texts, others practiced meditation, and some simply stared out at the infinite void, reflecting on the stars and the vastness around them. For Arjun, the quiet moments were spent studying old signal codes, testing the equipment, and ensuring that if anything went wrong, the ship would at least have a chance to call for help. Despite the routine, there was an undercurrent of tension that never left the crew. Uncharted space was unpredictable, and even experienced explorers knew that a calm day could turn into a crisis in minutes. There were stories of entire vessels disappearing without a trace, leaving only echoes in the communication channels. For the Odyssey, every blip on the scanner, every anomaly in sensor readings, and every unusual signal sparked attention and caution. They trained for emergencies regularly, running simulations for fires, depressurization, system failures, and hostile encounters. Every crew member knew that their survival depended on teamwork, quick thinking, and the hope that someone, somewhere, would respond if they were ever in true danger. Arjun's role as the communications officer placed him at the heart of both routine and emergency scenarios. He monitored channels that were rarely used, signals that were outdated, and frequencies that most humans had forgotten. The wisdom of keeping these channels active was questioned by newer crew members, who didn't see the point of maintaining lines that seemed unnecessary. But Arjun knew better. He understood that in deep space, old technology, old protocols, and even old friends could be the difference between life and death. Communication was more than just sending messages, it was keeping a lifeline open, a thread of hope in a universe that could easily snuff it out. As the ship approached the outer rim of its assigned sector, a strange quiet settled over the crew. The sensors showed minimal activity, no significant celestial events, no signals of nearby civilizations, and no immediate threats. Yet the calm had a weight to it. The crew had learned over years that space rarely stayed quiet for long. Every calm had the potential to mask danger, a hidden asteroid field, a lurking predator, or hostile explorers. It was the kind of silence that demanded vigilance, and Arjun felt it as he adjusted the scanner's sensitivity and recalibrated the emergency channels. He reminded himself, and the crew, that being alert didn't mean being paranoid, it meant surviving. The colony they represented relied on their mission to expand knowledge, and in doing so, they carried with them the reputation of humanity as Deathworlders. Though unarmed compared to military fleets, their presence alone was a statement. Humans were not to be underestimated. Even the smallest vessels reflected the ingenuity, resilience, and unyielding spirit of their species. While they were explorers first and fighters second, every human carried the potential to survive, adapt, and call upon allies who would come without hesitation. In this way, the introduction of the Odyssey and its crew set the stage for the story to come. They were ordinary in the sense that they were a small, peaceful group of explorers, yet extraordinary because of the legacy of humanity they represented. Their calm determination, technical skill, and unwavering commitment to their mission exemplified the traits that had earned humans their fearsome reputation across the galaxy. And though nothing in the immediate horizon suggested danger, the foundation was laid. These were humans capable of extraordinary loyalty, facing the unknown with courage, prepared to rely on both skill and legacy to survive whatever challenges awaited them. The calm that the Odyssey crew had grown accustomed to was shattered sooner than anyone expected. Just as the stars outside seemed endless and quiet, the ship's sensors began to detect irregular readings. At first it was subtle, a faint fluctuation in the energy signature of a nearby asteroid belt, a strange, almost imperceptible interference in the communication channels, and a shadow moving across the scanners. The crew exchanged uneasy glances. They had all been trained for anomalies, but experience taught them that small signs could often point to massive dangers. The subtlety of the readings only made the situation more alarming. Arjun Hale, as the communications officer, immediately began cross-checking every frequency and channel, trying to identify the source. His mind worked like a machine, filtering out false positives, detecting patterns, and predicting possible outcomes. The rest of the crew prepared for the worst. As the ship advanced deeper into the system, the unknown presence revealed itself more clearly. A small raider fleet appeared on the sensors, rough, unregistered ships that had no alliance with any known civilization. They were infamous across several systems for attacking research vessels and lightly defended colonies, capturing crews for ransom, and destroying ships for parts and salvage. The fleet moved strategically, almost predictively, suggesting experience and coordination. Their sudden appearance made it clear that the Odyssey's crew was in immediate danger. Panic began to ripple through some of the younger members, but Arjun remained calm, analyzing the enemy's movements and considering possible communication strategies. His experience told him that understanding the attackers' patterns was just as important as knowing their weapons. The raiders struck quickly. Their ships surrounded the Odyssey, and with precise timing, they jammed the vessel's engines. The sudden power failure sent the research ship into a slow, uncontrolled drift through the empty void. Every crew member felt the terrifying reality. Without propulsion, they were sitting targets in a trap. Emergency lights blinked across the corridors, red and urgent, while alarms echoed through the vessel. The crew immediately followed protocol, sealing sections of the ship, securing sensitive equipment, and preparing for the worst-case scenario. Boarding. The calm Arjun had maintained for years was tested like never before. He worked tirelessly at his console, trying to reach any friendly frequencies, any possible ally who might hear the distress call. At first, hope seemed nearly impossible. The Odyssey's standard long-range communication frequencies were outdated and, in this isolated sector, unlikely to reach anyone. The ship's location was at the very edge of human-explored space, a region few dared to traverse. Arjun's hands moved rapidly over the controls, adjusting power outputs, tuning frequencies, and trying to bypass the jamming signals. Every attempt failed. The crew could hear the raiders outside, their engines humming menacingly, weapons charging, ready to strike if needed. Fear began to creep into the hearts of even the most disciplined crew members. They realized that if no one responded to their calls, there would be nothing to stop the raiders from boarding the vessel and taking them captive, or worse. The tension grew unbearable. Arjun considered his options carefully. Every known protocol had been exhausted. Communication to nearby colonies or fleet bases was impossible. The raiders' jamming signals were sophisticated, designed to block even emergency codes. The ship's survival depended on a desperate, unconventional solution. Arjun remembered the ancient emergency channel, a relic from early human exploration missions. It had not been used in decades, largely forgotten by modern crews. Most considered it a piece of history rather than a practical tool, but our gen knew better. Humanity's early explorers had established that channel precisely for situations like this, when standard methods failed, when lives were on the line, and when no other help could be reached. The existence of the channel was a secret safeguard, a lifeline that bridged centuries of exploration, carrying with it the possibility of rescue from unexpected quarters. Despite the uncertainty, Arjun made the decision. He activated the ancient emergency channel, routing the signal through redundant systems and increasing its power output to maximum. The channel crackled with static, the ship vibrating as energy surged through its circuits. The crew held their breath, listening for any sign that the message had gone through. The raiders, unaware of what was happening, continued their approach, preparing to strike at the research vessel. Time felt stretched, every second dragging on endlessly. Yet the crew knew that in space, even a single second could decide life or death. As the SOS signal transmitted, the crew experienced a strange mixture of fear and hope. The signal was a shot in the dark, an attempt that might fail completely, but it also represented the unyielding human spirit, the refusal to give up, even when trapped and outnumbered. Arjun's voice, calm yet firm, reassured the crew. He reminded them that they had survived countless drills, that humanity had a legacy of facing impossible odds, and that someone, somewhere, might answer their call. His words carried weight not because they guaranteed survival, but because they inspired courage when courage was most needed. Minutes passed like hours. The Odyssey drifted silently in the void, powerless and vulnerable. The raiders began their final approach, their weapons systems charging, ready to breach the hull and take control. The crew prepared defensive measures as best they could, securing critical systems, readying escape pods, and bracing for impact. The tension was almost unbearable. The quiet moments between heartbeats seemed louder than ever, filled with anticipation and dread. Then, just as hope seemed to fade completely, the impossible happened. The sensors detected a massive energy surge, approaching at speeds faster than any vessel in the region could manage. The raiders' scanners malfunctioned, their systems unable to track the source properly, and out of hyperspace, the human Deathworlder fleet appeared, a force of ships the crew had only heard about in legends. The flagship alone, the Iron Tempest, was massive, bristling with weapons and technological marvels that made the raiders' crude ships look insignificant. The humans had heard the distress call, a signal sent through a channel almost forgotten, and had come without hesitation. The arrival of the Deathworlder fleet transformed the situation instantly. What had seemed like certain doom now held a sliver of hope, a promise of rescue. The raiders, realizing too late that they were outmatched, attempted to respond, but their efforts were chaotic and disorganized against the precision and experience of the human fleet. Every crew member aboard the Odyssey could feel the sudden shift in power, a wave of relief and awe sweeping through them. They were no longer alone. The humans who arrived were not just any humans, they were Deathworlders, legendary survivors who thrived in impossible conditions and protected their allies with unmatched ferocity. The intensity of the moment was breathtaking. The raiders tried to regroup, but the human fleet moved with flawless coordination, neutralizing threats with surgical precision. The Odyssey, once a helpless ship adrift in enemy territory, now had allies who would not fail. The crew could only watch in disbelief as the legendary fleet demonstrated the terrifying efficiency that had earned humans their fearsome reputation. For the first time since the attack began, the crew of the Odyssey allowed themselves to breathe, realizing that their desperate SOS had reached the right ears, and that humanity's loyalty and courage were far greater than they had ever imagined. In that critical phase, the crew understood the truth of the human legacy. It was not just about strength or technology, it was about a determination that spanned generations. Humanity did not abandon those in need, even when the odds seemed impossible. The Deathworlder fleet's response was immediate, relentless, and precise, a living testament to the enduring bond humans maintained with those they considered under their protection. The crew of the Odyssey began to comprehend that the emergency channel they had sent their SOS through was more than a communication line. It was a lifeline, a connection to a legacy that valued survival, loyalty, and courage above all else. As the human fleet engaged the raiders, the crew prepared for the next phase of the rescue. They had survived the rising challenge, faced their fear, and now witnessed an extraordinary intervention. Though danger had been imminent, the arrival of the fleet proved that in the universe, sometimes help could arrive from the most unexpected places, and that a single, desperate call for aid could trigger a chain of events, capable of turning near-certain death into salvation. This moment marked a turning point not just for the Odyssey, but for the crew's understanding of the galaxy and humanity's place within it. They learned that no SOS sent in earnest would go unanswered if it reached those willing to respond, and that survival often depended on courage, quick thinking, and trust in the enduring bonds humans maintained with one another across the stars. The moment that the crew of the Odyssey had feared the most had arrived. What had begun as a tense standoff now escalated into a life-or-death situation. The raider fleet, initially confident in their superior numbers and the helplessness of the research vessel, realized something was wrong. Their scanners were failing to pick up clear readings, their weapons targeting systems misfiring, and their coordination was slowly unraveling. The sudden, massive energy signatures approaching at impossible speeds were unlike anything they had ever encountered. It was as if the universe itself had shifted, bringing an entirely new player onto the battlefield, one that could not be reasoned with, bargained with, or ignored. On the Odyssey, the crew watched in stunned silence. Their senses, which had once been overwhelmed by the raiders' jamming signals, now displayed an incoming fleet of incredible scale. Ships of enormous size, bristling with technology and weapons beyond human imagination, appeared in formation. The flagship alone, the Iron Tempest, radiated a sense of authority and menace that seemed almost tangible through the monitors. The smaller escort ships followed in perfect coordination, moving as if they were a single entity, a living force designed to protect, destroy, and dominate simultaneously. For the crew, it was both awe-inspiring and terrifying. They had heard legends of the Deathworlder fleet, of humans who had survived the deadliest planets and fought battles across impossible frontiers, but seeing it in person was another matter. Entirely it was overwhelming. The raiders hesitated. Their initial confidence turned into confusion, fear, and anger. They had attacked what they thought was a defenseless vessel, expecting easy victory and valuable loot. Instead, they were now confronted by a force far beyond their comprehension. Their attempts to regroup were chaotic, orders were shouted, systems recalibrated, and pilots scrambled, but nothing restored their confidence. The human fleet's sheer presence disrupted their formation and morale. Every movement by the Deathworlders was precise and calculated. It was not a mere display of firepower. It was a statement, a warning that the humans were not only capable but also utterly relentless. Inside the Odyssey, Arjun's heart raced, but his mind remained calm. He had seen the fleet arrive and understood that the situation, while dramatically improving, still demanded vigilance. The raiders were dangerous, desperate, and unpredictable. One wrong move could still result in catastrophic damage to the ship. He monitored every sensor, every channel, every flicker of energy, and relayed information to the crew. Despite the fear, there was a growing sense of hope. They were no longer alone, and the arrival of the Deathworlder fleet meant that rescue was not just possible, it was imminent. The raiders, however, were not ready to surrender. They had been caught off guard and now faced the terrifying might of the humans. In a desperate attempt, they tried to scatter, hoping to outmaneuver the incoming fleet. They fired their weapons at the human ships, aiming for the largest and most threatening targets. But the Deathworlder fleet was prepared for such tactics. The shields on the flagship absorbed every strike, dispersing energy in patterns that left the attackers confused and exposed. Escort ships moved with blinding speed, intercepting smaller raiders before they could reach the Odyssey. Every offensive move by the raiders was countered instantly, precisely and without hesitation. The tension inside the research vessel grew as the crew realized the scale of the battle. The Odyssey itself was still vulnerable, floating amid the chaos, lightly armed and poorly armored. But they no longer felt helpless. The human fleet acted as both a shield and a weapon, creating a protective barrier around them. Arjun and his colleagues could see the battle unfold on the monitors. Witnessing the terrifying efficiency and precision of the Deathworlder tactics, ships moved with a synchronicity that seemed almost unnatural, their lasers, missiles, and defensive systems working in perfect harmony. The raiders, despite their aggression and numbers, were being systematically dismantled. Amid the chaos, the human fleet sent a signal, a clear, unmistakable warning to the raiders. It was not negotiable, and it carried the weight of history and reputation. But humans did not speak of mercy lightly. To the raiders, it must have felt like standing before an unstoppable force. The fleet gave one last opportunity to surrender, but the raiders refused, driven by desperation, arrogance, or perhaps ignorance. Their decision sealed their fate. In the following seconds, the fleet struck with precision strikes that targeted engines, weapons, and command systems, effectively paralyzing the enemy. The battle, intense and fast-moving, demonstrated why humanity was feared and respected across the stars. The Odyssey crew, watching the engagement unfold, could hardly believe their eyes. What had started as a dire situation with certain doom looming, now showed clear signs of resolution, but not without drama. The raiders' ships were being torn apart, explosions lighting up the darkness of space, debris scattering in patterns dictated by the force of the attacks. Despite the danger, the crew felt an incredible surge of gratitude, relief, and awe. The legends of humanity's capabilities were real, and they were witnessing them firsthand. The engagement also demonstrated something deeper than sheer power. The humans were not attacking indiscriminately. They were precise, calculated, and purposeful. Their focus was the protection of the Odyssey, not mindless destruction. Every maneuver, every shot, every deployment of force was designed to neutralize the threat without unnecessary collateral damage. It was tactical brilliance, born of centuries of survival on the deadliest worlds, honed through countless battles, and executed with unwavering discipline. The crew began to understand that this was more than a fleet. It was a symbol of humanity's legacy, cunning, strength, loyalty, and an unyielding commitment to those under their protection. As the raiders' defenses crumbled, chaos erupted among them. Some attempted to flee, only to be intercepted by the faster and more agile Deathworlder escorts. Others tried to regroup, but their communication systems were disrupted. Their confidence shattered, and their strategy rendered useless. The Odyssey crew could see the sheer disparity in skill and preparation. The humans were not just fighting, they were demonstrating the consequences of challenging their species and, more importantly, the consequences of attacking those who had called upon their help. Inside the vessel, the crew began to communicate more openly, their fear slowly giving way to cautious optimism. They discussed the fleet's movements, analyzed the patterns of the raiders' mistakes, and realized just how close they had come to disaster. The presence of the Deathworlder fleet had shifted the dynamics entirely. What had been a hopeless situation transformed into a spectacular rescue operation unfolding in real time. The crew felt a growing sense of wonder not just at the human fleet's capabilities but at the certainty that help could arrive even in the darkest moments. As the battle reached its peak, the Odyssey crew understood the full meaning of the term critical moment. They had been on the brink of total destruction, with no hope for survival, yet the timely arrival of allies turned the tide. The contrast was stark. Minutes before, they had been powerless and vulnerable. Now, they were witnessing a force that could control the entire battlefield with unmatched precision. The critical moment was not just the threat itself, it was the realization that survival often depends on timing, courage, and the existence of forces that will act decisively in moments of desperation. The human fleet's actions were both awe-inspiring and educational. Every move they made was deliberate, each decision calculated to protect life and neutralize threats. The crew of the Odyssey observed, learning more in a single engagement than they had in years of routine operations. They saw teamwork taken to a level that seemed almost supernatural, where every ship, every pilot, and every weapon system functioned as an extension of a single will. They began to understand that this was the essence of the Deathworlder legacy, not just survival, but mastery of the art of survival on a cosmic scale. By the end of the engagement, the raiders were completely neutralized. Their ships were disabled, destroyed, or captured. Explosions faded, leaving behind a scene of relative calm amid the remnants of battle. That human fleet held formation around the Odyssey, ensuring that no further threat could approach while simultaneously preparing to extend a hand to the beleaguered crew. What had begun as a dire, nearly hopeless situation had transformed into a stunning demonstration of loyalty, the skill, and the terrifying efficiency of humanity at its most capable. The Odyssey crew, still processing the events, began to understand something profound. The critical moment had tested their courage, resilience, and hope. It had shown them the absolute necessity of quick thinking, the importance of legacy, and the power of allies who would act decisively in the face of danger. They had witnessed firsthand the reality behind the legends of the Deathworlders, a people who would respond to a call for help without hesitation, whose presence could turn despair into salvation, and whose capabilities far exceeded expectations. This engagement marked a turning point in their journey. The crew realized that the universe was vast, dangerous, and unpredictable, but also that extraordinary help could arrive when it mattered most. They learned that the critical moment was not just about surviving threats, it was about recognizing and acting upon opportunities for salvation, even when hope seemed lost. The lessons of courage, loyalty, and decisiveness would remain with them forever, shaping how they approached the rest of their mission and how they viewed humanity itself. The battle had ended, and silence slowly returned to the vast emptiness of space. The Odyssey floated, still damaged from the earlier attacks, but intact. The crew was shaken, exhausted, and still processing the sheer magnitude of what had just occurred. For them, the nightmare of imminent destruction had transformed into an almost unbelievable rescue. And yet the reality of the situation was undeniable. Outside, the human Deathworlder fleet maintained formation, a protective wall around the research vessel. The sheer presence of the fleet radiated safety, reassurance, and power all at once. The crew realized that they were no longer alone, and for the first time since the SOS had been sent, they felt truly secure. Arjun Hale, as the communications officer, immediately began coordinating with the fleet. His fingers moved quickly over the console, sending identification codes, status reports, and situational updates. Each member of the crew followed his lead, organizing themselves and preparing to receive aid. The fleet responded almost instantly. Teams were dispatched from the human ships to board the Odyssey, carrying medics, engineers, and security personnel. The airlock hissed open, and the human personnel entered, moving efficiently, assessing damage, and stabilizing the ship. There was no hesitation, no unnecessary chatter, only action, precise and deliberate. The crew of the Odyssey could only watch in awe as these legendary humans worked seamlessly to restore order to their chaotic world. The first priority was the wounded. Several crew members had sustained injuries from the raiders' attacks and the initial system failures. The human medics worked quickly, administering treatment, checking vital signs, and stabilizing those in critical condition. They worked with a calm urgency, the kind that comes from years of experience in life or death situations. Arjun watched as his colleagues, once pale with fear, began to regain some color and composure. The medics' professionalism and skill were remarkable, but what impressed him even more was the compassion with which they treated the crew. This was not a mechanical response. It was a human one, a true recognition of the value of life and the importance of protecting allies, no matter the cost. Next, the engineers assessed the Odyssey's structural and technical damage. The ship had taken multiple hits, its engines partially disabled, life support compromised, and communication systems strained by the raiders jamming. The human engineers moved methodically, working in teams to repair critical systems while simultaneously upgrading others. They replaced damaged conduits, recalibrated navigation controls, and reinforced shields. Every action they took was precise, minimizing risk while maximizing efficiency. The crew of the Odyssey watched and learned, impressed by the knowledge and skill displayed. They realized that these humans were not only warriors but also experts in survival, maintenance, and adaptation, capable of restoring a damaged vessel to operational status faster than the crew could have imagined. As repairs and medical assistance progressed, Admiral Rhea Morgan, the commander of the fleet, requested a meeting with Arjun when the door to the medbay opened. She entered, exuding a presence that combined authority, confidence, and calm determination. Her reputation as a Deathworlder leader preceded her. Stories of her tactical brilliance and unwavering commitment to those under her protection were well known. She did not speak harshly or arrogantly. Instead, she addressed Arjun and the crew with respect, acknowledging the courage it had taken to send the SOS and survive until help arrived. Her words conveyed the principles of humanity's legacy, loyalty, protection, and an unbreakable moral code that valued allies above fear or danger. The conversation with Admiral Morgan was a revelation. She explained why the fleet had responded so swiftly and decisively. Humanity, she said, never abandoned those who had placed trust in them. Even centuries-old communication channels, long considered obsolete, were still honored if used in a true emergency. Their presence in the system was not just an act of military intervention. It was a reaffirmation of an enduring promise. Humans protect those who rely on them. For Arjun and his colleagues, this was more than reassurance, it was a confirmation of the bond between humanity and those they considered under their protection. It was a promise that went beyond contracts, treaties, or convenience. It was a principle rooted in the core of who they were. While the Admiral spoke, the human engineers continued their work. Sections of the Odyssey that had been critically damaged were stabilized, and emergency power systems were brought online. Hull breaches were temporarily sealed, and navigation recalibrated. The crew participated where they could, assisting the engineers, learning the techniques, and regaining confidence in their vessel. The collaboration was seamless. What had been a fragile, almost defenseless research ship was now reinforced, monitored, and ready to continue its mission. Though with caution, the crew felt an extraordinary sense of relief. They understood that survival had not been due to luck, but to the deliberate and expert intervention of the human fleet as repairs progressed. The Admiral and her officers prepared for the next step, escorting the Odyssey safely back to friendly territory. While the raiders had been neutralized, the region remained dangerous, with potential unknown threats lurking in uncharted space. The fleet organized a defensive perimeter, scanning for anomalies, potential ambushes, and environmental hazards. The Odyssey would travel under protection, and the human fleet's presence ensured that no additional dangers would reach them. The crew marveled at the organization and strategy involved. It was not a simple escort. It was a full-spectrum security operation, designed to protect, educate, and empower the rescued crew simultaneously. During the journey back, the Odyssey's crew began to reflect on their ordeal. Fear and relief mingled with gratitude and awe. They realized that the fleet's actions had gone far beyond a simple rescue. It had been a demonstration of capability, loyalty, and the principles upon which humanity's reputation as Deathworlders was built. They understood that courage alone was not enough in deep space. Strategic thinking, resourcefulness, and alliances could mean the difference between life and death. And they had witnessed all of this in practice, a real-life lesson that would stay with them forever. The journey back also allowed time for personal reflection. Crew members spoke quietly among themselves, sharing thoughts, fears, and newfound respect for humanity's legacy. The Odyssey, once a vessel representing isolation and vulnerability, now symbolized the power of unity, trust, and timely intervention. Arjun, particularly, considered the consequences of their decision to send the SOS. Without that desperate, unconventional choice, the crew might have been captured or destroyed. The moment of courage, combined with the fleet's response, had transformed a potential disaster into a story of survival and loyalty. As they approached safer regions of space, the human fleet began to scale back its presence, leaving a few ships to accompany the Odyssey while the majority returned to patrol other sectors. The crew had regained confidence, and the vessel was fully operational, though minor repairs would continue for some time. The departure of the fleet did not diminish their gratitude. Instead, it reinforced the lesson that humanity's vigilance and commitment were enduring, not dependent on constant presence, but on readiness to act decisively when required. By the time the Odyssey reached friendly space, the crew felt transformed. They had survived, yes, but they had also learned profound truths about human nature, courage, and loyalty. The experience instilled in them a sense of responsibility not only to continue their mission but also to carry forward the lessons of vigilance, trust, and readiness. They understood the calls for help, even from the edge of known space, would never go unanswered if they were made with sincerity and courage. In these moments, the Odyssey's crew experienced more than just a physical rescue. They were educated in the philosophy of survival, taught the value of unwavering loyalty, and reminded that even in the vast emptiness of space, acts of courage and trust could bridge enormous distances and overcome seemingly insurmountable obstacles. The fleet's intervention had not only saved their lives, it had demonstrated the principles that defined humanity's reputation, providing a living example of why humans were both feared and respected across countless systems. By the end of this phase, the crew had fully internalized the truth. Survival was never merely about being strong or armed. It was about the choices made in moments of desperation, the courage to act when options seemed limited, and the presence of those willing to answer a call without hesitation. The human fleet had shown them the meaning of loyalty, precision, and decisive action. And for the Odyssey, the return journey was no longer simply a trip back to safety. It was a journey of understanding, to reflection, and newfound respect for the legacy they had become part of, a legacy that would remain with them for the rest of their lives. The journey back to the colony was not simply a return to familiar space. It was a journey of reflection, understanding, and transformation for the crew of the Odyssey. The adrenaline from the battle had subsided, but its lessons remained vivid. Each crew member carried with them the memory of near destruction, the miraculous arrival of the human Deathworlder fleet, and the realization of just how powerful and loyal humanity could be. It was one thing to read about legends, but an entirely different experience to witness them firsthand, knowing that their presence had made the difference between life and death. For Arjun Hale, the experience left a deep impression. As the communications officer, he had been responsible for sending the SOS that triggered the rescue, and now he understood the magnitude of that choice. In those tense moments of isolation and fear, he had pressed a button that no one expected to work, an ancient emergency channel that had not been used for decades. It was a desperate act, born of necessity and courage, and now he realized that it had worked because humanity's values demanded it. The humans who answered the call were not there out of obligation. They were there because they believed in honoring commitments, protecting those in need, and acting decisively in moments of crisis. Arjun felt a profound respect and gratitude for this principle. The rest of the crew shared similar reflections. Each member had faced fear in its rawest form, knowing that the raiders could have overrun them at any moment. They had braced for boarding, prepared for combat, and accepted that their survival was uncertain. Yet, in the midst of terror, they had maintained discipline, followed procedures, and trusted one another. Their trust had been rewarded, not through luck, but through a combination of courage, skill, and the timely intervention of allies who embodied the pinnacle of human capability. For the crew, this was more than a rescue. It was an education in resilience, loyalty, and strategic thinking. The Odyssey itself reflected the story of survival. Though it had been damaged, repaired, and reinforced, the ship symbolized the delicate balance between vulnerability and strength. Its walls, once scarred by near catastrophe, now carried the marks of endurance and adaptation. Systems that had been on the verge of failure were restored, upgraded, and secured, thanks to the human engineers who had worked tirelessly during the rescue. The crew understood that the ship's survival was intertwined with their own, and in caring for the vessel, they were also honoring the lives it carried. The journey home became a moving lesson in stewardship, responsibility, and respect for the tools and technology that enabled their survival. As the fleet escorted them closer to their colony, conversations among the crew shifted from the immediate horror of their near-death experience to broader reflections on humanity's place in the galaxy. They considered the meaning of being called a Deathworlder, a title that carried both fear and admiration across systems. Humans, they realized, were not defined solely by their strength or survival skills, but by their moral code, the commitment to protect those who relied on them, even across unimaginable distances. The Odyssey crew had witnessed this firsthand, and the lesson resonated deeply. Survival in the universe was as much about loyalty, courage, and principle as it was about firepower or technology. The medics and engineers who had accompanied the rescue left a lasting impression as well. They were experts in their fields, yes, but they were also teachers. As they worked, they shared knowledge, explained systems, and demonstrated techniques that would benefit the Odyssey crew long after the fleet departed. In practical terms, the crew now had skills and understanding that made them stronger, more capable, and more prepared for future missions. But beyond the technical lessons, there was a subtler education, a demonstration of what it meant to act decisively, compassionately, and courageously, even in moments of extreme danger. The crew began to see that heroism was not just about grand gestures. It was about doing one's duty with precision, care, and integrity, regardless of personal risk. Arjun reflected on the significance of the SOS itself. That single act, taken in desperation, had catalyzed an extraordinary chain of events. It had reminded him that in the vastness of space, where isolation and danger were constant, the decisions of a single individual could have far-reaching consequences. The emergency channel, long considered obsolete, had proven that legacy and preparedness could bridge generations, linking explorers from different eras in a single moment of salvation. This understanding instilled in him a renewed sense of responsibility not only to continue his work on the Odyssey, but also to ensure that knowledge, procedures, and connections were preserved for future crews who might face similar peril. For the younger crew members, the experience was formative. They had faced the brink of death and seen the extraordinary lengths to which humans would go to protect life. It was a lesson in courage and faith, not in luck or chance. They understood that being part of the human lineage meant being part of a tradition of resilience, resourcefulness, and loyalty. They began to internalize the values they had witnessed. Never abandon those in need. Trust in your allies, and act decisively when circumstances demand it. These lessons would guide their careers, their choices, and their understanding of what it meant to be human in a universe filled with unpredictability. The arrival of the Deathworlder fleet had also left an indelible impression on their perception of fear and danger. Previously, the crew had viewed space threats as abstract, distant, and manageable through careful planning and protocol. Now, they had experienced firsthand how rapidly circumstances could shift, how fragile human life could be in the void, and how vital it was to act with intelligence, courage, and urgency. Fear, they learned, was not something to eliminate. It was a signal, a reminder of the stakes, and a motivator for decisive action. When coupled with courage and skill, it could inspire solutions rather than paralysis. As the Odyssey approached the outskirts of the colony, the crew's sense of gratitude deepened. They were returning not only as survivors but as witnesses to the extraordinary capabilities and values of humanity. The fleet had not merely saved them, it had set an example of what it meant to honor promises, act without hesitation, and protect life at all costs. Every member of the crew felt changed, more aware of their responsibilities, more appreciative of the trust placed in them, and more committed to carrying forward the lessons they had learned. The emotional impact of the experience was profound. For many crew members, tears were held back, not out of shame, but out of respect for the intensity of what had transpired. They had faced terror and emerged victorious not solely because of their own actions, but because they had trusted and called upon allies who embodied the best of human capability and character. The realization that someone would respond without hesitation, even across vast distances, provided a sense of security and confidence that was hard to put into words. It was a reminder that humanity's strength was not only measured in ships or weapons, but in principles, courage, and loyalty. Upon returning to the colony, the crew was greeted with relief and admiration. Families and colleagues had feared the worst, knowing the dangers that the Odyssey had faced. The stories of the rescue spread quickly, reinforcing the legends of the Deathworlder fleet and reminding everyone that humanity's reach, power, and loyalty were more than tales, they were living reality. The crew shared their experiences, emphasizing not only the technical aspects of the fleet's intervention but also the moral and ethical principles that guided it. They spoke of courage, loyalty, and the importance of acting decisively in critical moments, inspiring a new generation of explorers and communicators to carry forward these lessons. In the aftermath, the crew took time to update and preserve their communication systems, ensuring that the emergency channel that had saved them would remain operational for future missions. They documented their experiences, noting every detail of the attack, the fleet's response, and the lessons learned. These records were not just technical logs, they were narratives of courage, hope, and the enduring human spirit. They would serve as guides for future crews who might face similar challenges, providing both practical information and moral inspiration. Finally, the crew reflected on the broader meaning of the ordeal. Humanity's reputation as Deathworlders had been built over centuries, through acts of survival, courage, and decisive action. They had now witnessed firsthand why this reputation was deserved. The fleet's response demonstrated that humanity did not abandon its own, that loyalty and courage were not abstract ideals but active, living principles, and that even in the vast and lonely expanse of space, one could always hope for help when it was truly needed. As the Odyssey docked and the crew disembarked, there was a quiet, shared understanding among them. Their journey had been harrowing, but it had also been transformative. They were no longer just a research vessel crew, they were witnesses to humanity's legacy, participants in a story that would inspire others, and bearers of lessons that could guide future explorers. The memory of the SOS, the battle, and the fleet's intervention would remain with them forever, a reminder that courage, trust, and loyalty could turn the direst circumstances into survival, hope, and inspiration. By the end of this phase, the crew understood that their story was not simply about danger and rescue, it was about principles, human connection, and the enduring power of courage and commitment. The experience would shape their lives, inform their choices, and deepen their understanding of what it truly meant to be part of humanity, capable of incredible feats and unshakable loyalty, even in the most extreme circumstances.